Hello, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. So happy to be here. Well, earlier today, we've had great talks about the promise of quantum computing, the timelines we can expect. Now we're going to change focus a bit, and we're going to talk about cybersecurity and the quantum era. I guess our goal with this panel is for you to hopefully walk away from this session and have a better understanding at what's at stake and hopefully how you can prepare for what's coming. And you're really lucky because we have today a great and amazing panel, I should say, with real pioneers in the field. So I would like first to ask them in maybe 1 minute top for each of you to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your organization. Let's start with you, Bridget.
Thank you very much. My name is Bridget Walsh. I'm the Associate Head at the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. It's the Government of Canada organization responsible for a lot of the cybersecurity that we do in government. So we provide operational support to the Government of Canada to secure the networks that we use. We provide advice and guidance to industry, work very closely, especially with critical infrastructure. And importantly, we have both cryptography and math research within our organization that we've been using to sort of track and understand both the cryptography that we use today, post-quantum crypto, and tracking quantum technologies and how they've advanced so that we can adapt our advice and guidance on transitioning to quantum-safe crypto.
Healing?
Hello, everyone. My name is Healing. I'm Business Development Lead at the Quantum Bridge. And Quantum Bridge is a Canadian startup that was spinning off from the University of Toronto in 2019, so it's about 6 years old. And so basically what we do is that we offer the quantum security solutions to protect the organizations against the quantum threats with a mission of providing the unbreakable cybersecurity in the post-quantum era. Nice to be here.
Bruno?
Hi, Bruno Couillard, CEO and co-founder of Cryptography. We designed the QHSM, which is a quantum-safe hardware security module with quantum cryptography, post-quantum cryptography, and it's built to resist quantum computing powers. It's important for our digital economy, and especially the securing of the trust in the digital space, and that's what we do.
I'm Michele Mosca, CEO of Evolution Q. In my early days, I had fun trying to break public key cryptography, and then I learned about quantum, and now with AI, I think there's huge advantage to the code breaker. So, and for the last many years, I've been thinking about how do we defend against quantum and other emerging attacks. And we started the company a decade ago in response to government and industry trying to get help to deal with this emerging quantum threat. And we transformed into a product company in 2020 when we realized there's a huge product gap. We knew how to achieve scalable security against the known threats with post-quantum cryptography, but scalable resilience, we didn't really have that sufficiently well in the market. So what our software solutions enable is scalable cryptographic resilience, and I mean, we'll talk about that more in the panel. But c'est vraiment un plaisir d'être ici parmi vous aujourd'hui.
All right, so let's jump into it. If you've been following the quantum news, you for sure know that there's great progress happening almost every day in the field. But quantum computing is also a double-edged sword. So I'm going to turn to you, Bridget, and ask you if you could explain to us, well, first, should we be worried? What should be worried about? What's the threat? And how can this impact us?
Absolutely. Thanks very much. And so, like you say, while quantum computers have great promise to give us great benefit, there is a threat. And when we talk about the threat posed by quantum computers to cybersecurity, I like to think of it in two pieces. And I have a prop. So when I think about using my phone every day, I know, for example, that I can send a secure chat message to my sister. I know that that's encrypted. I can send a secure chat message or a secure encrypted email to a colleague, and I know that that's encrypted. But the reality is that when there is a powerful enough quantum computer, it will be able to break the public key cryptography we use today, which means that if somebody stores those messages that I send using my phone, saves them, and then uses a quantum computer in the future to break the crypto, they can read those messages. So that first threat, especially when you think about business messages I might be sending that may have a long life value, or businesses or organizations that have very long life information, the threat really is that someone is storing that information and decrypting it while there's still value in the message. So it's the store and decrypt threat. The other piece to it is the fact that if I think about 20 years ago, the vast majority of what people thought of when they thought of crypto, they were thinking about encryption. Yeah, it's true that we did authentication and we understand that that existed, but the vast majority we thought about was encryption. Today, when I think about using my phone, it auto-updates, it checks that I'm contacting the correct server to prevent spoofing attacks. It's doing all sorts of authentication checks on a daily basis. When I get that update, I know it's coming from the Google store because the encryption and the authentication is working to tell me that it's the right place. When there's a sufficiently powerful quantum computer and that crypto can be broken, I don't know where my update is coming from. There are so many things that a threat actor can do if that authentication is broken. So it's not just about reading and understanding and seeing the secret messages. It's about getting onto devices, being able to disrupt devices, and using that power to create cyber threats writ large.
Thanks a lot. Would somebody want to add something?
Well, I think, Bridget's really laid it out super clearly. Many of you may have heard of the so-called Moscow equation that I launched maybe 15 years ago to help people understand and assess quantum risk. And there's the information shelf life component, and then the migration time component. And it's a sum. If it takes you 10 years to migrate to quantum safe crypto, and you're supposed to keep the information secure for another 10 years, you pray, you hope that the quantum attacks don't happen within 10 plus 10, 20 years, right? And 10, 15 years ago, the only people who really cared were in the first category, right? Who were worried about long shelf life of the information. But I think we've now passed the tipping point where there's material risk, we don't migrate in time. Mm-hmm. And the integrity and availability and control, Bruno likes to talk about OT, and the control of connected devices and the availability of critical infrastructures is really at risk now. I'm not sure we'll migrate in time. Probably, but I really would like to give a more confident answer there. So I think there really is much more at stake now than confidentiality. It did motivate, those use cases motivated our hyperscalers and others to get ready, but there's still a lot of work to be done to avert the even worst case scenarios of critical infrastructures not being available. And maybe just to frame it in risk language, because I think there's a failure here in how we're governing cyber risk, in my personal view, in that we're very worried about vendor concentration risk. We're worried about supply chain risk. We have all these sovereignty concerns. But if the cryptography is broken by an adversary anywhere in the world, like they're basically, this is much worse than what we're currently risk managing through all our vendor questionnaires and so on. So I think we need to we need to more viscerally understand the stakes here and more proactively manage the risk.
All right, so there are all these risks. I hope you're not too traumatized, or maybe just a little. Let's talk about solutions. Where are we heading? There are solutions which these people are working on. Maybe one of the big things that happened a little less than a year ago is NIST in the US, the National Institute for Standards and Technologies, published post-quantum cryptography, known as PQC standards. I think that was a very important milestone. So I'd like to ask my panelists, maybe Bruno, if you could very rapidly explain what PQC is and why would it be more secure than what we're using?
That's a challenging question. But the gist of it is PQC is a new set of tricks or math challenges that we believe are absolutely not breakable by quantum computing capabilities. Because what we have today that we've been talking about, which is the public key cryptography that we have all been using for the past 30 years, is based on mathematical construct that back in the 70s when they were invented, there were no one that could consider breaking it using computers that existed at the time. But quantum computers have the ability to break that. So we needed new constructs, new math challenges that would be deployable in our existing material, like in your cell phone, in your watch, in your car, and anywhere that you run intelligent systems. You still need to run cryptography, and it still needs to use bits and bytes. So what we did there, NIST and the global community launched a massive challenge to the brains of the world and asked, could you find, in your views, challenges, mathematical problems that would be impossible, at least as far as we know, unbreakable by quantum computers? That's post-quantum cryptography in a nutshell. I'm not going to try and explain all of the different variants of these tricks, but NIST last year in August came out and said, here are 3 final standards the world has adopted, the world is now being able to deploy, and we all can build into our products, our systems, our protocol, and you see a vast array of producers of cryptography, protocol designers, PKI providers, the web PKI, many, many layers of the systems that we call cyber is now adopting these standards, and it's slowly being deployed. And it's a challenge on a global scale, but it is happening. It's been now, I guess as Michele would have said in the past, the starting gun has now been fired, and we're all in this process. So that's how I would explain it.
You said, as far as we know.
Yes.
So I'm going to challenge you. Is it really secure? Can we trust that there's not a hacker somewhere who's going to leverage a quantum computer or AI or something else to break it?
I'll probably say a few things, but then leave it to Michele and Bridget. We currently, from a state of understanding of what quantum computers can do, and the reality is there were a few very brilliant people back in the 90s that came up with tricks, Shor and Grover, that came up with ideas. If I had a quantum computer today, I could do this and that, and I could break RSA. And in 1994, the world went, ha, and moved on, because there were no quantum computers. Today, it's a different, like no one is laughing anymore, and we're having to deal with it. But there's likely going to be more tricks that get to be conceived of. There are so many more humans on this planet thinking about what can I do with the quantum computers. Chances are we may find more tricks up our sleeves that we didn't know of. So it's a constant evolution thing. Cryptography has been kind of, you build it and you send it out there and you get people to try and attack. And if it resists for long enough, you get to build some confidence about this kind of capability. But it's a time-related things. And a lot of the tricks we're currently deploying have not had the same amount of time. Some have many years, but in some of the algorithms are also fairly new ideas. So it's an interesting debate. I'm not going to try and say where I feel it's going to go, but that's my view.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Yeah, I think they're secure against the known quantum and classical attacks, and a little more than that, to be fair. And I come from that mathematics world, so there's a pretty sophisticated tradecraft and body of knowledge we've developed in computer science and cryptography over the past 50 years. So we've been able to say, instead of, take the effort of 1,000 mathematicians looking at 100 systems and have kind of the confidence of 1,000 people looking at 5 problems. So we have more confidence there. But we should be confident, but not overconfident, right? At the end of the day, there's all proofs and so on, but the proof is just that you can't, as n goes to infinity, break this system unless this other problem is broken, and then that would be surprising, right? But so what? If academics are surprised, they'll be like, cool, we get to write more papers. So I think we should be confident, but not overconfident in the security of public key cryptography. We should definitely use it, but it gives us security against, what we know and expect, but it does not give us resilience. So I think we need a stronger game plan given the stakes now. This is not the early 90s anymore. The whole global economy rests on these foundations. And public key isn't the only part, but it's such a big part of it. We do need to bolster it, in my
Healing,
view.
turning to you. So I understand that at Quantum Bridge, you're developing technology based on probably, we could take old-fashioned key establishment techniques to which you've added a modern twist in a very clever way, I think. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, sure. So as we were just talking about PQC and also like the potential of the quantum computer, something are known, something are unknown. So it's actually valuable for us to explore the different options and alternatives here. So one of the options here we are actually working on is a symmetric key systems. Basically, the communication parties using the same secret keys when they do communicate with each other. And this is indeed a very old cryptography. It's been a while and it's been there for a long time already. But let me give you actually a simplest example of the asymmetric keys, like pre-shared key, right? Just imagine this. Instead of like negotiating keys over the internet, actually there's somebody actually delivering the suitcase physically to each party for communication. And when they receive the same keys, they can start to do the communication or use the key to do what they want. So as you can see, this is a very logistics-based approach. And this approach is very secure if you do it in the right way. But obviously, you see that the drawbacks of this kind of efforts is it's not very scalable, right? And you have to trust a single authority. So, however, we see that symmetric keys necessity is because it's widely applied in the industries. The simple example is that look at your Wi-Fi routers, and when you punch in your password keys, and these keys are already stored on your router, and these are the symmetric settings. And we see the symmetric applications in the IoT networks, in the embedded devices, and they are used in, for example, military or defense, wherever the security are tightly managed. So what we are working on at the Quantum Bridge is trying to kind of address these kind of challenges on the scalability of key distribution and also not to rely on the single source of trust. Simply speaking, you can imagine that instead of shipping the pre-shared keys to each communication party, each user will receive a piece of the puzzle so that they don't have to decide who to talk to before the communication, and it's much more scalable in terms of delivery complexity. And whenever the two users want to communicate with each other, they can use their pieces of puzzle to kind of form into picture, the same picture, in a secure way, and also in an efficient way. And this is, simply speaking, what we are doing by developing this DSKE protocol. And I understand the Evolution Q also is working on the symmetric methods as well. Thank you.
So one more acronym that you might have heard of is QKD, which we sometimes hear is unconditionally secure. Let's try to demystify all of these different solutions. First, Michele, can you just explain in a nutshell what QKD is, and then we'll discuss how these come into play together.
Right. So it's quantum key establishment is probably in hindsight a better name for it, but it became known as QKD, so we keep calling it that. And unconditionally secure is a mathematical term used by academics, and we probably shouldn't use it with general users because it, like provable security, does not mean what most people would think it means. It's because it's unconditional provided all these conditions are met. So it's like, well, then what do you mean? So it's not conditioned on a hard mathematics assumption. That's what we mean. But that's an academic. Let the academics worry about the nomenclature. So when I think about how do I compare, I'm glad we now have two reference points, right? Public key infrastructure and this old school symmetric key methodologies. And just to step back, in the 1980s, we only had what Healing and I and a few others are calling symmetric key infrastructure. People with briefcases, maybe augmenting it with symmetric key methods, old school cryptography we've had for thousands of years, right? If you and I share a secret key, I can encrypt, you can decrypt, for example. And that's much more, we don't know how to break that with a quantum computer. It's much more long-term secure and resilient. But as Healing mentioned, not super easy to scale. So when in the late 80s, early 90s, we were wanting to use the internet and so on, how do I achieve scalable security, right? Instead of innovating and trying to figure out how to scale symmetric key infrastructure, this magical public key method came along, which was perfect timing, a fundamental enabler of the last 30 years of economic growth, because the key you use to sign a document is different from the key the way you can verify a document. So there's this asymmetry. That's why we call it asymmetric cryptography. It's much more functional, scalable, beautiful, but that asymmetry comes with some cost. There's additional code breaking risk, but it's kind of worth it until you really, there's a demand for resilience, right? So, but that's where this forgotten, not completely forgotten, but this less talked about art of symmetric key infrastructure is really valuable, and our company has an approach. QBT has an approach. I'm a fan of both, and there's a small handful of others. And so where does QKD fit in all this? So again, just to lay the context, for the last, 40 years ago, we only had symmetric key infrastructure for anybody who cared about cryptography and security. For the last 30 years, we've had both. But the symmetric key cryptography has been more for niches. Along comes quantum cryptography, and it's kind of, in an abstract sense, it achieves the security levels of somebody with a briefcase, because you can't mathematically code break it, right? So in some sense, it's kind of like this out-of-band manual exchange of keys, except I can use this untrusted infrastructure to do it. But from a trust assumption, from all the infrastructure I need, because there's always some physics, because academics will say, well, as long as factoring is hard, as long as LWE is hard, your system is secure. Not exactly, right? There are certificate authorities, there are out-of-band dependencies, you need an authentic copy of public keys. But that's a heck of a lot easier to know somebody I kind of trust gave me a copy of Microsoft's public key. If I don't trust them, I ask 2 or 3 people. That's an easier out-of-band dependency than, I don't have to trust that they kept it secret, right? So it has the mathematical elegance of public key cryptography, right? Because I don't need to trust, I don't need to trust the channel. Whereas the guy with the briefcase, I really have to trust the whole channel. I have to trust the physical security of that key as it's transported. With QKD, I don't. So it has properties of both, but pragmatically, it's more like an out-of-band symmetric key exchange. So I think functionally for the next many years, because you need a quantum channel, whereas with public key cryptography works on any channel that can convey classical bits. Whereas quantum cryptography, QKD, needs a quantum channel. And again, these networks exist, right? We have Toshiba and others in the audience. They already exist, commercial grade, and they're continuing to expand longer and longer distances with fewer and fewer trust assumptions. A beautiful thing, but it'll always be a subset of the global telecommunications infrastructure. So QKD, it's used the property of quantum mechanics to tell you if somebody has been snooping on your communication. So you don't need to assume some asymmetric math problem is hard. The laws of physics assure you that if somebody eavesdropped, you'll know about it. So if they didn't, you now have a shared secret. So it gives you the benefits of both worlds. The catch is you need a quantum channel. But in the 90s and 80s, if somebody said, oh, you should do e-commerce, you don't have to build the internet yourself, right? You just have to be ready to use it. So this is an infrastructure that will continue to be deployed, and the one we have the new MANA network here in Canada. So I think it's a beautiful new addition. If you want cryptographic resilience, you need the defense in depth, you need the cryptographic diversity, you need this multi-factor authentication approach. So I love that we have PKI, we have SKI, and quantum key exchange is sort of at the evolution of this multi-factor authentication approach to achieving cryptographic resilience.
So I hope we haven't confused the audience speaking about 3 different solutions, but no, I think you've said it very well, Michele. So often people ask, are they in competition? Which one's going to win? Essentially, probably what the people want to know in the audience is which one should be adopting. So I'd like maybe to ask you if you want, from your perspective, what's the advice?
Yeah, and I think maybe I'll highlight some things that I think were really important that were stated. So So we're looking at a situation where we know that the public key crypto we use today will be breakable when there is a powerful enough quantum computer. So we're moving toward quantum safe crypto. We're moving toward post-quantum crypto. And it was mentioned, NIST has standardized it. And standardization is so important. Standardization means that we've had that thousands of people really looking at it, banging their heads against the wall, trying to break this cryptography, not breaking it. And so we do trust it. While it may not be as resilient as different systems we could build in the future, today, it's something that we most certainly trust. And using trusted, standardized cryptography that's then certified, because a lot of those new products are going through certification processes now, are the things that we always recommend from the Cyber Center's perspective. It's true there are other mechanisms. So quantum key distribution is another mechanism for, what we say, agreeing on a set of keys with which we can communicate. But at this point, it's not standardized yet. So from that perspective, it's something where we should be putting a lot of research and understanding what does this look like in the wild? Because what we have is an understanding of, it may be different math underlying the new post-quantum crypto, but we know what that kind of, from an engineering standpoint, we know what that kind of crypto looks like. So now is the time to invest in the research to understand what do attacks on quantum key distribution look like? What do we need to do to standardize it? And how can we safely incorporate it? So right now, our recommendation is always go with the certified, standardized crypto.
All right. I think that it's time to go to one of the questions, which is very related to this. Well, actually, one person asked, and we've been using this terminology a few times, crypto resilience. What do we exactly need by that? And connected to that is the question is, all right, let's be practical. We need to prepare, but where do we start? Some people mentioned, is it buy a crypto inventory? Which stakeholder do we need to convince? If there was one or two actions that you would recommend to people in the room to start with, what would that be? And for going back also, can somebody define crypto resilience?
Crypto resilience?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I define it as having three components. One is cryptographic agility. Of course, be secure against a known threat. So migrating to PQC, it's like the zeroth. Like, everyone has to do that. But if you want to be resilient, apart from being resilient against the known threats, and historically we'll look back and say, why was that even a question? But you need three things. Agility, so if something is problematic for whatever reason, whether it's code breaking or implementation or supply chain compromise, you can switch in a reasonable amount of time. It's not a 10-year, 20-year journey. And agility, I'm using it in quotes because it really means a lot of things, and I think we should start with the goal of being resilient, against and being able to recover functionality quickly. And we shouldn't get too obsessed with all the technological ways to achieve it, because you don't want to be too agile, because then that's an attack vector as well. So, fundamentally, business-wise, risk-wise, it means being able to update and change your algorithms sufficiently quickly to meet your business, continuity planning requirements and so on. That's not enough. Like, agility is great if you're still alive, right? So adversaries aren't going to give you advanced warning. Hey, we're about to break your codes. Let me know when you're ready. They're going to, it could be game over, right? Russia's attacking the Ukraine. Like, this could be, you could lose your country. You could have your satellite network hijacked. Your critical infrastructure could be destroyed. All your money could be gone. All your Bitcoin could, so not to scare people, but agility is not enough. So, and again, defense in depth and symmetric key, this is not new. Like, our intelligence agencies use this today. Military uses it today. Central banks use symmetric key methods, out-of-band key exchange today. So you need the defense in depth, basically. In there, you need the diversity, you need the symmetric key methods, and I think we definitely want to mature the quantum key methods. And I think we also now, for where there's really a long-term confidentiality need, and you want it with a high degree of assurance, I think you want things more designed for long-term security, so that I think there's extra value in incorporating these symmetric key methods that don't fail if a public key primitive is compromised. So that's those three components: agility, defense in depth, right, and long-term security are an important part or essential part of cryptographic resilience.
Anything to add?
Yeah, I might say from a very practical perspective, a lot of it is about managing an inventory, right? A network is made up of devices. And one of the most important things a network owner needs to do, whether defending against the quantum threat or traditional cyber threats, is to make sure they know where their equipment is. I've never encountered a network of any sort of size where the owner didn't know that, oh, there's an edge device sitting out here and it's got 2 critical vulnerabilities sitting on it and it's unpatched. And those are the ways that people get in. And when you think about the quantum threat, it's those devices, those services that are running, and we don't know what crypto is being used. We don't maybe even know they're there. So it's about managing the system. And secondly, I think it's about a very practical kind of procurement and life cycling mechanism. Now is the time, because standardized, safe, post-quantum crypto is coming online and being certified. Now is the time for anyone who owns a network, a system, to be talking to their vendors, to be making sure that what they're buying is upgradable, that is going to contain quantum-safe crypto, so that it's going to be life-cycled through, and those systems will be protected. Because as McKelly very rightly points out, the time frame is getting closer. You know, we don't anticipate, and I know McKelly has a great survey of opinions of experts on when a quantum computer will be able to break cryptography. And the chances aren't high in the next 5 years, but then they go up sharply after that. So our advice is that this could happen as early as in the 2030s. So really something that anyone that owns a system needs to be thinking about today.
So you mentioned,
Oh, sorry. Can I just, so brilliantly put. One thing, just having been on the front lines of dealing with customers and helping them manage their risk, the cryptographic inventory and so on, that is absolutely essential. But some people think, oh, so step 1 is I'm going to finish my cryptographic inventory, then I'm going to assess my risk and then I'm going to start doing something about it. Like, no, like the known risks mitigate right away. In parallel, start updating how you manage your, do everything Bridget was saying, but it doesn't stop you from mitigating the known risks, right? So you should do both. There's a top-down, because I saw one beautiful talk by a colleague at one of the largest telco equipment manufacturers. He's like, here's how 5G works. One slide, TLS, IPsec, MACsec. Biggest threat is firmware updates. So we're prioritizing firmware updates, making it post-quantum. One slide, 30 seconds. There's your quantum risk assessment. Of course, they should be doing their crypto, making sure they haven't missed anything, and if there's, but they didn't immediately assess your risk. So I would say the goal is a risk assessment and mitigate it, and an essential piece of that, but it's not step 1 and then everything else follows. Is the inventorying, which is just part of managing your concentration risk, I would say, and your vendor risk.
At a different talk a bit earlier this year, there was a gentleman from Amazon, Matt Campagna, who was giving a keynote. And one of the things that he said, which was really interesting, in their world, they have a massive amount of IT capability and security being deployed. One of the things that he kind of suggested was that they have, inside their systems, realized that many dependencies of different components, your code signing, your PKI, your everything, tends to start with, you need some public key cryptography that's going to feed some of these machines and systems that are users of certificates. And he said, we came to realize that our PKI were kind of a constant dependency. Every time we looked at different things, we'd figured our inventory, we needed some ways to extract and get certificates to these systems so that they could be post-quantum ready. And he said, well, if you think of that, and in your system, when you do the inventory, as Michele was suggesting, you might find that you have a lot of different things to worry about. Chances are, if you have in your installations, anything calling itself a PKI, whether private or public, that's probably one area that will require it to move quickly to post-quantum capabilities so that you can feed the rest of your applications that run based on it. So that was something that I thought was also very interesting, to the experience that they're gaining through these this challenge that we're all facing from a company that has quite an interesting set of capabilities to point that this is one of the area that they all kind of came back to that one element was interesting.
Can I just touch upon, like because I totally agree with Bridget, we want standards-based, certifiable cryptography. In terms of the journey QKD is taking, so first of all, I'm a big fan of cryptographic diversity, but to be clear, I don't mean 100 harebrained ideas that we don't trust any of them. I mean a really small set of highly vetted things, including QKD. And there's a big difference between being some harebrained stuff that will never become certified and stuff that is clearly on the path to certification. And QKD is in that track. And secondly, there's also a well-defined pathway for new, like PQC, because many people are saying, well, let's use it in addition to the current methods to give it time to mature in the wild, right? And that's the same thing we do already today with QKD. No, like nobody serious deploys only QKD. They combine it with the current standardized stuff. There's standardized ways to integrate it, right? And so on. So I think getting QKD to continue to be mature and so on and become a bigger and bigger part of creating cryptographic resilience isn't a spectator sport. There's a lot of, again, deep research that needs to happen to continue to mature and invent the next generation of it. But it's certainly, commercially deployable today. Obviously the cryptologic authorities for certain niches of the parts of the government decide when and what to mix and match different methodologies. But QKD is already being deployed to protect digital infrastructures in a very responsible defense in depth way, right? So it's certified, standardized interfaces for the way it's combined with existing tools, and more of these methodologies are being standardized and certified as we go forward. It's not a spectator sport. If you want to get from A to B, we do need to nurture a healthy industry with enough investment and customers to continue to provide us the solutions we want and need.
Right. I suggest we take a step back and talk about a little bit about adoption. I'd like to know, are people moving? Are governments moving? Is the Canadian government, other governments? Is there regulation that we can expect, or policies, or timelines to abide by? What about, I think, Quantum Bridge, you're working with banks. Where are they on the adoption curve? Tell me about this.
Yeah, sure. So absolutely. We have seen like some early moves from the industries, including financial services. Of course, though, there are other sectors as well. But I think the reason is fairly simple, because these organizations, they're managing probably the most highly sensitive data for our digital economy. And especially for banks, they're actually, for example, managing the high-value transactions. So it's a security risk for sure, but I think it is more to that, especially when it comes to think about the finance systems. There's trust. If you have no trust from the public, then it is so easy and so quickly that we see that the financial systems actually collapse. And I think probably the most recent examples we have seen in the recent years is the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, just because of lack of confidence from the public. So when it comes to think about the quantum threats and the cybersecurity, I think the banks are definitely highly incentivized and motivated on this front. However, there's a lot of challenges. For example, the large banks, they have so many priorities, so many fire to put out, and they may not really put this on their radar or set as the top priority. For the smaller guys, they're probably thinking, okay, so we probably will wait for the larger, major organizations to act and set an example, and they will just follow. So this creates sort of a dilemma, right? And nobody actually moves very fast. So I think at this point that the sort of compliance-driven mandates from the regulators actually serve as a critical role, actually pushing this sector forward. Basically, these guys from the regulator, they are telling the financial institutions, okay, here's the following things you are going to do, so that the financial institutions, they start to, first of all, be more aware about the whole threats and the whole situation. And second, they have more confidence to start to build the strategy of their quantum migration and think about the potential technologies and methods. Right? Nobody is going to adopt the new technology from nowhere and then take responsible for it. And so I think that's sort of the challenge. But the good thing is that we have already seen some positive signals. For example, in this year, early January, we've seen from the Bank of Israel, they have actually issued a letter, a mandate asking their financial institutions to be submitting an initial quantum readiness plan by early next year. So I think things like this will greatly push the industry to really be aware and to start to get things going. And we're also doing the positive things on the ground. For example, last year in 2024, in the G7 workshop focused on building the financial resilience for the quantum resilience for the financial sector. Quantum Bridge, working with the partners like EvolutionQ, we have actually demonstrated a live deployment of the quantum safe network communication among several central banks, including, for example, the Bank of Canada, Bank of Italy, Bank of France. So I think this actually demonstrates the technical readiness that we do have the tools and technologies available, but also demonstrate that the cross-border collaborations, and also shows the cross vendor interoperability, which is super important. You don't want to adopt one technology and find yourself stuck in your own small world, and this is something we absolutely want to avoid. So yes, financial institution is probably one of the first movers that probably others, I'll let the others to add or comments, but I'm optimistic that in the next few years we'll see more and more pilot projects and transitioning from the pilots into the real life deployments.
Bridget, are public institutions ready?
Yeah, absolutely. So within the government of Canada, we've already taken steps to protect our most sensitive long life information. So certainly have made sure that that's secure, especially from the threat of harvesting information and decrypting later. When it comes to the rest of the systems, because we have a lot of systems across the government, we're working very closely with our colleagues across government, and in particular, Treasury Board Secretariat, to come up with a quantum transition strategy. And from that perspective, we know that we certainly can't tell others. We know our systems, we don't know other systems. But at the same time, we do plan on publishing that strategy and the timelines associated with it, so that it's available for others kind of as a model on what can be done to transition to quantum safe crypto. And what I will say though, and as McKelly so nicely puts it, I mean, the time to act is now. So as that certified crypto comes online, getting that planning going, talking to vendors about transitioning is the space that we should all be in right now.
Right.
And, we've also seen actual deployments of our technology. So at Crypto4e, we have HSM. We do have PQC validated algorithm implementations. And we've had to deploy with vendors of semiconductors that have to embed in their designs today that will live on for 10, 15, 20 years, the post-quantum roots of trust that will allow them to keep firmware updating. So it's all about long-lived signatures. So they've already been deployed and operational. There are products out there today that use this capability, and it exists, it's doable. So the world has gone out and has started to deploy in operational scenarios. And we're seeing a lot of these scenarios unfolding in front of us in multiple different locations and different dynamics. So manufacturing, semiconductors, then next thing will be your system level designs, PKI, banks, and it's really happening as we speak.
So, and I just want to, there's often this misconception that, okay, the Americans, they're using they're going to mitigate the quantum threat by PQC, and Europe and Asia by QKD. That's just nonsense. Everybody who's using PKI is upgrading their PKI everywhere, including China and Europe. And everybody who's currently using, and people are still using symmetric key infrastructure everywhere. they kind of do it differently, they might approach it differently, communicate it differently. Everybody around the world is doing both, upgrading their PKI and continuing to use and expand their use of SKI. Right? There's Nokia in the audience, for example. I mean, at the lower levels of the stack, symmetric keys have been used forever. Right? And Nokia has been evolving how they deploy SKI for many years and maturing it and also incorporating QKD, as have others in this space. And there's QKD in production deployments around the world, and that's increasing, including financials and so on. Every critical sector has to manage its own risk. Of course, they leverage all the great work being done by the government authorities and so on. But like, if you look at the early days of PKI, the banks led the charge, and the government followed in some aspects of it. Right? And then the government adopted, what they were doing. And the same is happening with QKD and these novel symmetric key infrastructures. Another thing we need to remember is standards don't just fall out of the sky, or the standards organizations are conveners. Like, end users have to ask for the standards. That's how ECC was first standardized. Banks said, hey, this stuff which we've been using, we want to standardize it so we can use it more. And that's happening with QKD as well as these other SKI methodologies. So there is adoption, leading banks in the world. Like, you're too late if you want to be first. It's really how quickly do you want to follow, and how quickly do the other critical sectors want to follow.
I think this is a great note to conclude that essentially end users have to be part of the solution. Unfortunately, we need to wrap up. I think we could have keep going on and on. I see a lot of questions coming in, so I guess we managed to get interest from the crowd. Please come and talk to us, especially the panelists during the breaks, if you have more questions that haven't been answered. For the next part, I would like to welcome on stage Johan Gestin, CEO of Kai Photonics.